what police found in the yard that morning was shocking that they refused to release the details. You need to stick around until the end to hear the profiler's chilling theory about the fife taker who still lives in that town. There are stories that linger in the air long after the news cameras leave, long after the voices of reporters fade into static, long after seasons shift and the world pretends to move on. Stories that remain in the corners of ordinary homes, in the breath of a mother waking in the middle of the night, in the silence that sits behind her eyes. In Cumberland Beach, Ontario, there is a story that refuses to rest. A story that began in a small home not far from the water, where a teenage girl named Leah Souza once laughed, dreamed, and filled the room with an energy that could not be replicated or replaced. A story that began in the most familiar place of all, the safety of one's own home, a sanctuary meant to be untouched by the nightmares of the outside world. Her name was Leah. She was born on the 7th of June, 1977, to a mother named Laura Souza, a woman who walked through life with quiet strength. Laura had raised Leah on her own in the early years, and though there were financial struggles and the ordinary weight of parenthood, the home was never short of warmth. The two moved together through small joys, shared laughter, and the soft lessons of daily life. When Michael, Leah's baby brother, came along, their world widened just enough to feel complete. A mother, a daughter, a child. There may not have been a man of the house, but there was love, and Leah was never the type to feel diminished by what others believed a family should look like. The place they lived was modest, a combined living and kitchen area, a tiny bedroom, the kind of house where sound traveled, where people could hear each other breathe. The home sat on quiet land near the lake, surrounded by trees and the soft hush of rural life. Cumberland Beach was the kind of community where neighbors greeted each other at the store, where children rode their bicycles without hesitation, where doors were often unlocked because fear seemed unnecessary. It was the sort of place where innocence felt durable. Nothing about Leah's life hinted at what was coming. She was bright, confident, playful. Those who knew her remembered her humor, her boldness, the way she carried herself with an unself-conscious joy. She was the kind of girl who didn't merely exist in her surroundings, she illuminated them. But innocence is fragile, and sometimes the world does not need a reason to shatter what it never deserved to touch. Summer of 1990 had its usual rhythm. Long daylight hours, warm air, children running through sprinklers, friends staying out later because September still felt far away. Leah and her family had just returned from visiting Laura's sister, a 6-week stretch of family time before the school year was to begin. Leah was preparing for high school, that quiet bend in life where childhood remains close but the future begins to whisper. She was 13. She was hopeful. She was unaware that time was running out. On the night of September 1, the wind was still. The Souza home settled into its nighttime calm. Leah lay on the couch, wrapped in the peaceful looseness of sleep, while her mother and baby brother slept in the bedroom. The world outside was dark but calm. There was no sign that the air had shifted. No warning that someone was watching. No intuition to lock the door that had always felt safe, unlocked. And yet, somewhere between 1:30 and 3, 0 inches the morning, a shadow crossed into their home. The intruder did not come in hesitation. There was intent, certainty. It felt less like an act and more like something erupting from a place inside that had been rotting for years. The tool used to break the window became the tool used as weapon. The first blows were directed at Laura, ripping her from sleep into a nightmare made of metal and bone and shock. The harm was swift, merciless, her consciousness slipping in and out as if the world itself were dimming. But the attacker was not finished. What happened next to Leah is something no language fully conveys. To describe it would be to intrude upon her dignity, and dignity is the one thing the world owes her in death. But she suffered. She suffered inside the home and outside it. She suffered because someone decided she should. The morning light did not just reveal the aftermath of pain, it revealed a loss of innocence so absolute that it haunted every person who came to know the details. When a friend could not reach Leah by phone the next day, she biked to the house. Childhood friendship, pure in its simplicity, led her straight into horror. Leah's body was in the yard. The scene was not quiet. It was devastated. Police were called. Paramedics arrived. Laura, miraculously, was alive, bruised, broken, blinded in one eye, her skull rebuilt with metal plates, her memory of the night obliterated. And Michael, the infant, slept through it, untouched. The attacker had spared him, but whether that was mercy or disinterest, no one could say. Fear moved through Cumberland Beach like a cold fog. A town that once left doors open began to barricade itself. Windows were locked, curtains stayed closed. Parents stopped letting children ride freely. Weapons and hammers and heavy flashlights appeared beside beds. People who once felt untouched by violence now slept with their backs against the wall, turning toward shadows at every creak. The police searched, they collected evidence, but nothing seemed to hold. No clear fingerprints, no usable DNA, the weapon was missing, the clothing likely stained beyond recognition was never found. The scene had all the markings of someone who knew how to disappear into the very place they lived. One clue remained, the footprint of a size 9 or 10 leather athletic shoe. Leah's mother had seen the attacker, at least for a moment, but trauma steals memory, and her memory had to be rebuilt from fragments broken in the dark. Doctors tried everything: hypnosis, sodium pentothal, even magnetic stimulation of the damaged hemisphere of her brain, but time had been the enemy. Memories do not become permanent instantly. They require minutes. She never had those minutes. Her experience had been taken before it could form into memory. Like shutting a computer down before the file is saved, it meant the truth existed once, but was now gone. Years passed. And yet the case did not disappear. Investigators held onto it through retirements, through changes in technology, through shifts in public attention. More than 1,500 people were interviewed. Suspects arose and dissolved, leads glimmered, and then went cold. One man in particular drew attention: Brian Timothy Elson. 4 months after Leah's death, he unalived another teenage girl named Sandra Bannister, just 12 kilometers away. He pled guilty to manslaughter, served 6 years, and walked free. Police suspected he may have been in Cumberland Beach the night Leah was unalived, but suspicion is not evidence. And evidence remained absent. He denied involvement. He claimed an alibi with dozens of witnesses. The law could not hold him, yet the shadow of doubt stayed. Years later, a criminal profiler named Jim Van Allen studied the case. He had seen brutality before, more times than anyone should, but this case lingered. He believed the attacker was local, not a stranger passing through someone who knew Laura was alone, someone who knew the layout of the home, someone who felt overlooked or rejected and carried rage like gasoline. He believed this person did not flee the community after the crime. He believed he stayed, lived, worked, passed neighbors on sidewalks, ate at the same local diner everyone else did. Someone who, when the news came on, watched other people react with fear and felt nothing. At times, there were whispers about a different man, one described in a book written years later by a retired officer who believed a serial predator in the region might have been responsible. The story pointed toward patterns: break-ins, attacks, a method of entry through windows. But leads are not proof, and proof continued to slip like smoke. The town did not heal, it adapted. Healing implies closure. Cumberland Beach had none. Every anniversary brought new interviews, new hopes, new pain. In 2008, police erected billboards near the crime scene. In 2010, a television investigation revisited the case, uncovering that the grandmother of one of the suspects lived on the same street at the time of the unalive. In 2015, on the 25th year since Leah's death, Laura spoke aloud, a grief that had never softened. She mourned the future her daughter never got to live, the birthdays that came and went, the school years she never finished, the laughter she would never hear again. By 2020, another investigator had taken over the case. He read through the thousands of pages, retraced the analysis, spoke to experts, compared the case to others. He said the mayhem was off the charts. He said mother and daughter never stood a chance. He said someone out there still knew something. The official record remains open. The story is not finished. It waits for someone to speak. It waits for the moment silence becomes unbearable. There is a fact that remains impossible to escape. Someone committed this crime. Not a ghost, not a myth, not a shadow, a person with a name, a face, a history, a person who has lived all these decades knowing what he did, a person who has looked in mirrors and seen himself unchanged while others shattered, a person who, at some point, walked away from that yard and resumed living. And that knowledge is its own kind of horror. Because the world often imagines monsters are easy to recognize, but the truth is, far more unsettling. Sometimes the monster is the one who holds the door for an elder, who buys groceries like everyone else, who laughs in public and sleeps at night. Sometimes the monster is the one who has never once felt remorse. The community carries the scar. Parents who were once carefree grew watchful, then protective, then quietly fearful. Teenage girls grew up with an instinct their mothers never had, to lock doors, to walk quickly, to know the shape of the darkness before stepping into it. Boys grew up with the knowledge that mayhem was not something distant. It lived in their own hometown. The innocence of Cumberland Beach died with Leah, and nothing ever replaced it. What remains now is memory. Not the detailed memory of events, but the memory of a girl who should have lived. That theory about the life taker living among them changes everything. Tell me who you think committed this crime. Let me know if you believe the real answer is in the case files. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. For more true crime stories that will keep you up at night, make sure to follow the channel